Do you think people are so fixated on their limits?
It's human nature. We have this duality to our personalities. I mean, good and bad,
Yeah.
light and dark, yin and yang, so there's risk involved
Right.
in addressing our limits. If we just kind of stay in our safe spot, then we don't have to really go out there and put ourselves out there.
Why can limits be good? One, and why can limits be harmful in the end?
We're all human beings, and as human beings, we all have strengths and weaknesses. I think of a golf analogy, but if you say to yourself, you're standing over the ball and you say, hey, there's water on the right. If you fixate on the water, then chances are the ball goes in the water. But if you acknowledge that the water's there, but I'm going over the water with a little draw and I'm going to hit the green. It's okay to acknowledge it, but don't fixate on it.
But if you are trying to break beliefs, Steve and I broke this down. The first one is, the second element to it is, and then the final one is just taking something. What if the problem isn't your limits, but how much you focus on them? What you focus on grows, and what you don't focus on eventually goes. Welcome back, Steve.
Hey,
Took me a
thanks
minute.
for having me. Yeah, you got through that.
I got through that 3 or 4 tries. But anyways, guys, if you're new to this channel, my name is Coach Royce. This is Coach Steve. And we talk about a lot of fitness stuff, a lot of health stuff, a lot of wellness stuff. And it looks like it's tank top day.
Yeah.
So comment below.
It's always tank top day.
Yeah, who you
in
think
Vegas.
has better, who has better arms, Coach Steve or me?
I don't know.
There'll probably be more Steves on there.
Yeah.
They're like, Steve. But anyways, man, let's talk about limits, because I like to create content around my frustrations. And one of the frustrations that I oftenly get, and you get as well, is like people will come up to you like, I wish I could start that, but I'm not as fit as you. Or one of the big ones is like, I'm not fit enough to CrossFit, or I can't do a push-up because X, Y, and Z. I can't do a squat because X, Y, and Z. I can't do a cardio program because I have this genetic thing. There's so many of these limits that I think is limiting people from doing what they're actually capable of. And what I'd like to break down today is, one, why do you think people are so fixated on limits, right? Number two, why is it good and why can it be bad? And then number three, we'll unpack this. This is like my favorite part of it, is how we would coach someone if we wanted to break their limits. So let's start with the first one.
What was it?
Yeah, my fault.
Yeah.
The first one is, why do you think people are so fixated on their limits?
Well, I think, it's human nature. We have this duality to our personalities. I mean, good and bad, light and dark, yin and yang, so let's face it, it's safe.
Yeah.
There's risk involved in addressing our limits. So if we just kind of stay in our safe spot, then we don't have to really go out there and put ourselves out there.
Right.
And I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, exactly. There's pain. You've talked about, there's potential risk, there's potential injury.
Yeah.
There's, especially when you deal with fitness. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's safe. It's safe and warm to sit on the couch and eat Cheetos all day, right?
I 100% agree on the pleasure part. On the pain point, I want to share a story, because you've seen my son, and just recently he's been playing soccer, and he's 7 years old, by the way. So it's not like he isn't a competitive team, but half the kids don't even know how to play, right? So anyways, I was watching him play, and in soccer, when you throw the ball, you got to keep your feet down, and teaching that to 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds ain't happening.
Yeah.
So there was a extent for like 5 minutes where the referee was constantly just blowing his whistle. He was like, nope, switch out. And like the teams would switch out. None of them would get it right. And eventually the coach got so frustrated and was like, he ran over to the kid and was like, I need you to do it like this. Keep your toes down on the floor, and then you could throw the ball. And then the game would keep going. And it dawned on me that pain, the way we perceive pain is like the coach, but really pain is just the referee. They're just blowing the whistle. They're just following the rules. They're just like, hey, you got to do X, Y. But what we've believed pain or our limits to be is it becomes somewhat of a teacher. So what I'm coming down to is like pain is a really, really awful teacher, but it's a decent referee. And for some reason, I think that's why we're so fixated on limits, because we think that that's the coach. But really, guys, it's just the person blowing the whistle doing his job. So that's my whole thing about pain on the pain end. And I think it's like, yeah, it sucks hitting your limits, because when you hit those limits, whether it's a physical barrier or it's like a weight loss barrier, there's some type of pain involved, whether it's actual physical pain or like emotional pain, like I didn't succeed. And I think that's why we're so fixated on our limits.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. I think that, society in general has embraced comfort,
Yeah.
pleasure,
Pleasure's
dopamine hits, social media. I mean, it's all about instant gratification, but where we find that we are really going to, once we kind of acknowledge that, how many people are taking cold showers, and, we like warm showers. We like our warm jackets and our air conditioned homes, and, and nice comfy recliners, and, so, when we put ourselves out there, not only is there pain involved potentially, but there's also risk, there's, and there's a lot of other things, it's risk of, like we talk about older athletes.
Yeah.
There's a potential risk of injury, risk of social isolation, or just in general being embarrassed. Maybe you're just not fit enough. You don't think you're focused on things that I'm not fit enough. I might get hurt. I might get embarrassed.
Yeah.
I might look stupid.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to kind of get into that trap.
Yeah. Setting limits. I was explaining this, like if I ask 10 random people, it was like, hey, if you train really, really hard and do X, Y, and Z, you're actually going to be a gold medalist, and you're going to be famous, and you're going to be able to you're going to be doing all of these cool things. I don't know if all 10 of them would say yes to that. Like if I had 100% certainty, and then they also understood, and it dawned on me the reason why people set limits is because setting limits makes their life a little bit more comfortable. And there's nothing wrong with that.
100%.
Not everybody needs to be like a gold medalist.
Sure.
There's certain sports I'm like, that sounds good. I'm not going to set that record for that. That sounds like it's really tough. It's really hard. And I'm not going through that type. So there's this like layer of comfort when you set limits for yourself. And I don't want to demonize these limits, because it is what it is. But if you are listening to this and you're like, man, I feel like I want to hit the next level, the next barrier, how do I break it? First, you have to acknowledge why it's there, right? So once it's there, then we can actually see who we're actually fighting against, and we can get into something that's a little bit more cooler. So let's get into the second question, Steve. And the second question is, why can limits be good? One, and why can limits be harmful in the end?
Well, I think that, we're all human beings, and as human beings, we all have strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Everybody has limitations. And once we kind of acknowledge that it's not you're not alone. Nobody just pops out and becomes an Olympic lifter. We all have to struggle to get to that level. So I think when we kind of acknowledge that it's okay to know that you're not good at everything, and we as coaches have to help people, guide them through that process. But, once they kind of break through that and acknowledge it, that's where we can really start seeing the growth, because people will have a tendency to, like we said, focus on our limitations. That's okay. I think of a golf analogy, and you may not be a lot of golfers out there, but if you say to yourself, you're standing over the ball and you say, hey, there's water on the right. If you fixate on the water, then chances are the ball goes in the water, right? But if you acknowledge that the water's there, you acknowledge the water's there, but I'm going over the water with a little draw and I'm going to hit the green,
Yeah.
right? So it's okay to acknowledge it, but don't fixate on it.
Yeah. I see that happen a lot with people's injuries. They focus so much on the injury itself and then they make the injury worse somehow. As opposed to like, what can I do that doesn't hurt? And let's focus on that. And when they start focusing on other things, like for instance, you had shoulder injuries in your competitive streak.
Yeah.
We rarely are like, let's just focus on your legs because we can put intensity towards that. And when we do that early on, your shoulders actually repair, and then we can actually work your shoulders again. And I can see people doing that. They're like, yeah, it's just a little bit nagging pain. Let's just keep working through it. They're focusing on.
Or how often have you seen someone that just says, I'm not going to go to the gym because I have a shoulder injury?
Yeah.
How often have you seen that?
All the time. And that's another reason why limits can actually hurt you in the long run, because now it's like hindering your progress, which is I think one of the main reasons why I think limits can be painful.
I mean, I love someone like Everett. Well, shout out to Everett. You know, he comes in here and he just has knee surgery and he's in here like the next day or two.
Yeah.
Well, he's doing the physical therapy, but he's in there and he's working out. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, whoa, dude, I mean, there's no stopping.
So, he understands these
exactly.
limits. Yeah. So he understands those barriers. A great analogy is like, we'll teach people how to do a power clean. And we'll start out with the PVC pipe, and they'll do a certain amount of reps. And we could see certain errors happen, and we can clean that up at the PVC pipe level. But as they start to become more proficient in the PVC pipe, it's really hard to see where they're weak at. So we put more weight. We start with the empty bar, and it still looks pretty good. And then we put another 10-pounder on there, and then it still looks pretty good. And then we put 25, and it still looks good. And then we put 135. We start to see things. They're like, oh, they're pulling too early. Oh, their first pull is really too fast. And what I'm getting into here is when we start pushing towards the limits is when we start to see areas in their life or in their movement pattern where things start to break. And those are the moments where I actually can coach you. Sometimes I just like, dude, that looks so good. I'm not quite sure what to see yet. Let's throw another kilo on there. And then I'm like, and it shows it to a point where it's not detrimental just yet. But I think that's like one of the reasons why I think limits can be so advantageous is because when we push towards that top 20%, we actually see what we need to see. And it's invisible from like 80 and down, which I think is crazy.
Exactly. I think that we have to reframe our mindset towards like failure.
Yeah.
We know that, most of personal growth comes from failure.
Right.
Sometimes it tests our character. In the fitness world, we can't be afraid to fail. I like to think of, say, an Olympic weightlifter who's, how many times do they fail a lift before maybe they actually succeed? It's just part of the process. Mm-hmm. And they don't get fixated on the failure. Mm-hmm. And I think that, to your point, is we have to eventually test. We don't know someone's limits until we actually test those limits.
Yeah. 100%.
So how do we get there? Well, we have to keep, we have to increase the intensity, the load, the frequency, whatever we have to do to get them there. And then we have to help them to say it's okay, because I see it a lot when you come in the gym and you'll see someone, like maybe we're doing snatches or something and someone fails. Mm-hmm. And I love to see that. But when they fail and then they get upset and I go, no, that means you're there. You're pushing, that's what I want to see. Mm-hmm. If you just succeed, life isn't that easy. It's not going to be a constant, line of successes. There's going to be failures. There's going to be disappointments. Yeah. There's going to be things where you have to regroup. But then when you regroup, what does that do for you?
You get to that next level.
Exactly.
And one thing that does come in mind, because sometimes it's not the movement pattern. The athlete's moving really well. I've seen these athletes that move really well and they just don't get the new max. And then I'm like, how's your sleep? What's your protein intake?
Yeah,
like? I was like, I'm eating the same. I was like, you're 140 pounds. How are you eating the same from 120 to 140? He's like, well, I just never thought. It was like, I think we need to eat more protein. So there is this really cool point when you start to get to those massive limits. When you start to holistically look at other areas of your life, you start to improve those other areas too. So finding those limits sometimes can make your sleep better. Finding those limits can sometimes make your nutrition better. Finding those stress limits can make your time management better at work, so you don't have to work. It's pretty. Once you start to really hit those limits, you can have this holistic perspective of what needs to improve, and that's why I love those limits.
Exactly. I think it takes you. Well, you have to. Like we said, you have to acknowledge that you have those limits, and then you have to. And then with our guidance, we can help you to recognize them and then push past them.
Yeah.
And that's where the fun, that's where the sweet spot is. I mean, it's really, really fun when we see athletes who are really starting to get it. They get past the pain barrier.
Yeah.
And the mind is actually the biggest weakness. I mean, we think that the mind is on our side, and it really isn't in most cases. It seeks comfort. It seeks safety. It doesn't want to go out there and do risky things. And it wants to, keep you in a bubble and keep you safe. And that's its job. Right. Otherwise we'd all probably be
dead,
parasailing off the top of these buildings and stuff. Half of us would be dead. That's true.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I want to add on the other side. How can limits hurt? And here's a really good example, because I'll have athletes that will get like elbow tendonitis at some point in their career, or maybe a back issue, which is fairly common when you start to progressively get stronger, right? We start to see a break in mechanics. We start to see a break in your nutrition, in your stress management, your soft tissue. Something always happens. In the pursuit of getting stronger, an injury normally happens. And in these limits, there's two paths typically. One, there's let's holistically address this. What are you doing for your nutrition, sleep, so on and so forth? And then there's the other path where it's like, let's just take a cortisone shot and let's like not be in pain. That temporarily can feel like you're getting healthier, but oftentimes what ends up happening is we neglect movement pattern issues. Maybe your back pain was because of your movement pattern. We need to address that. Or number two, we need to actually eat a little bit better. You're just crushing alcohol and you're getting 2 hours of sleep. So what ends up happening over the long run is they become dependent on cortisone shots, one, or two, it gets to a point where they can no longer do the movement because they've just been doing the movement improperly, that they just completely destroyed themselves, but they didn't feel the pain in the process as they kept on doing it. Limits are not bad. How you almost respond to them is more important, more critical. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that most injuries aren't necessarily acute. There are acute injuries. You go out there and you pull a hamstring or something and it happens.
Yeah.
But say we went out and we said we're going to start sprinting, but you haven't sprinted since you were 50 years since high school, and then you pull a hamstring. Was that an injury, or was that just, it happened because you weren't ready for that exercise? I think that in some cases, we've kind of almost, maybe this is off topic, but I think that because, our perception towards fitness is a lot towards the commercial franchise gym. And we go in there and we say, okay, we want to get in shape. And so we there's some kid at the front desk and he gives us the 15-minute tour, and he may or may not know what he's doing. And then we're on our own. And so I think that the risk for injury, yes, the machines are probably safer.
Right.
Temporarily, but it's kind of a double-edged sword, because you don't have any real training. Your training is to watch this guy do a workout, and then you see what he does, and then you mimic his behavior, and hopefully he was doing it right, or he shows you. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people are probably don't want to go to the gym. And let's face it, it's not the social environment that it used to be. I mean, people used to talk. Now everybody's on their phones.
And their headphones,
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of reasons why fitness gets a bad rap. On the other side of the coin, you come into a gym like ours, and you're going to pick up a barbell, and there is risk involved with picking up a barbell. And a lot of people, we talked about the motorcycle analogy. I used to ride a motorcycle, and I still have my Harley, but but the first thing people tell you is you're going to kill yourself on that thing. And you know what? And there's some truth to that, but there's also, that's the perception. And it's the same thing with CrossFit or a barbell. A lot of people say, hey, you're going to get hurt.
Right.
And we have to change that mindset because, yes, exactly. It is very dangerous. It can be dangerous, but if you do it safely and go back to, postural imbalances, make sure that it's done safely and effectively, without introducing load initially.
Yeah. There's so much things that you touched up on there. So number one, I was one of those guys that someone got on a motorcycle and I'd be like, oh, you're gonna kill yourself.
Yeah,
bro.
Exactly.
But then I had this conversation with this like super zen dude, pretty burly beard like yours, super shredded. And I was like, why do you ride a bike? It just kind of just blows my mind. And he was like, you know what it is, Royce? It's the only time where I get to de-stress. It's the only time where I'm so focused. I'm not on my phone. I'm like, I have to be super aware. Like, and I'm actually just like, it's just me and just the road and I could feel the wind. And I was like, oh, this guy's actually doing something super healthy for his body, and learning how to de-stress has this like cascade effects of health, right? And then on my end, I'm texting while I'm driving, and I'm probably the one that ends up killing him, not the other way around. So there's that aspect of it. What I want to get out is like the machine aspect. So there is this like temporary relief where you're just doing the machine, and it is that. But then when you get into the actual real world environment where you're required to move into this like 360 degree environment, are you equipped to handle that? You don't see a Smith machine in the jungle, you like it just doesn't work that way. And when you're falling or tripping, you're not falling or tripping in a quad extension machine. So how are you equipping yourself to handle that? And that's where it comes in, the limits. And I get it. But that's why I love limits, because when you're doing functional training, like for instance, when a person's first back squatting, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's messed up. Their mobility's off. They're very quad driven. All of these mechanics that shouldn't be there. But it's also giving me an idea of what we can do with some of those isolated movements. We need to work your triceps. We need to work your hamstrings. We need to work your glutes. Like from your point, a lot of times people will go into the gym and they'll just do things that other people do, but it's not exactly what they need. And if they actually did a combination, I think a combination of both might actually be more advantageous. So you do these massive functional training movements, and then you have a friend, or you can take your own video and just assess it. Like, how are you moving? Where is the pain points? And then you can leverage some of those safer machines and safer movements that are more isolated to strengthen the overall movement.
Right? 100%. Yeah, I got so many things going on in my head right now thinking about. So back to the motorcycle, when you talked about your friend.
Yeah.
Most people don't ever reach that level of concentration.
Yeah.
I mean, or maybe they have, but they just... One thing I think that people who do ride a motorcycle understand, and I'm not talking about, somebody who's being reckless. I'm talking about someone who's really mindful. Yeah. You're at a level of consciousness that's on a different level. Most people don't drive, it's like autopilot. You can't do that on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And I think that translates into functional exercise. When you go to the gym and you're on a machine, you can almost be mindless in the movement. Whereas when you come here, or you put a barbell in your hand and you're doing a, maybe a heavy lift or a snatch or something you have to be 100% in the zone. I mean, it's that flow. It's your mind. It may not be conscious. It may be unconscious, but it's next level. I mean, you have to be 100% all in, or you'll either miss the lift or you might actually get hurt. So you have to be a lot more mindful. And that's the, sure, functional training, absolutely. It's helping us to be more functional and do things that we can do outside of the gym. But the mind part,
the therapy part,
and I'm not just talking about the dopamine hits and the when you succeed, the feeling that you get, but I'm just talking about going through the process of learning technique. And it's really a different animal than just going to the gym and getting on a machine and changing the weight and just going
Yeah. I just had a conversation with my client. They were like explaining their wins. I lost this much weight, but what's really more interesting is I find this to be therapeutic. And it's just like your point. When you are in there, you're just focused on you and all of your stresses go away. What you got to do for your boss, where your next kid is going to play a sport, right? Like the hard conversation you have to have with your wife, that disappears for a little bit. And it's just you, it's the workout, and just that 1 hour of just grounding you to who you are has this like massive health benefit outside the functional training you're talking about, right? So that is like 100%. I completely agree with that, for sure. So I want to add one more thing on this because I think we've just been talking about limits in the gym. I see the limits happening also outside the gym, meaning like their nutrition. And I'll often get clients, again, if you have clients long enough and if you are in this pursuit of weight loss and achieving the most optimal health, you will hit some type of nutritional plateau or a weight plateau. You're not going the wrong direction. You're actually going in the very, very right direction. You just have to choose whether to go left or right from the position that you're in. And oftentimes I'll see athletes, they'll follow a nutrition plan and then they'll hit this mark. And what ends up happening is two ways. One, they either do like this little small pivot where they change something and then they'll have these microscopic changes over time and then they get it to the next goal, or they just stop what they're doing and they start looking back. So limits doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It can also be behavioral. And if you are not breaking that new limit, I would address, what am I doing here that I can possibly change like 1 degree more? An example is like, one example that we've changed with one of my clients is at lunchtime, he only does salads and protein. And that small incremental change over like 90 days had netted him like another 10 pounds of weight loss from one small thing. We kept the nutrition plan. The only thing that we tweaked, his nutritious proteins were all good. We just tweaked his lunch. And if you just do that, that can have massive impacts. And that's like the value of like breaking limiting beliefs.
Yeah, I think that maybe it's just human nature to have an all or none type, behavior. We feel like if we go on a diet or something, we have to do 100%. If we go to if we want to get into a fitness regimen, it has to be 100%. And I think to your point is sometimes if we just make incremental changes, we're steering the ship, we're not jerking the wheel. Mm-hmm. We just change 1 degree, but 1 degree
adds up
to a huge change over time. Yeah. So yeah, we try to get people to realize, because I think diet's a good one, is people think that they have to go all in on a diet. And I think that's a mistake. I think if they just make a little incremental, like to your point, if you could make like a 10% change, which is maybe just 1 or 2 meals, right? Mm-hmm. And we can tweak that lunch. Just lunch. We're not, and we do that as coaches. We don't want people to go all in because we know the risk for failure is a lot higher when people try to do too much too soon. How many times does someone walk in the gym? I see it all the time, and all of a sudden they've drank the Kool-Aid, they're all in, and they're here. They want to come here 6 days a week, twice a day. You're just like, oh, you just see it coming, and in some cases it's okay because we can probably, when they break, we can pick up the pieces.
Yeah. I address it 2 ways. So the client that comes in 6 or 7 days, they want to come in 6 or 7. If the want of them coming an extra 3 days is bringing them less stress and more joy, I say, let's do it. But if the intention is to lose more weight, I tell them no. It's very interesting. And the reason for that is because it's very temporary. And they're creating this we've played sports. And one of the things that I really hated about my back end sport is we were punished for conditioning. Every time we did something wrong, you guys got burpees, you guys got push-ups, you guys got sit-ups. Ironically, if you did more push-ups, burpees, and conditioning movements the proper way, it would make you a better athlete. And for like 10 years after my career in high school, I attributed conditioning as torture. So if you're like, I want to go in 6 days a week to lose more weight, but the end outcome to it is you feeling like it's torture, it's pain. Yes, you're going to lose weight, but you won't lose weight forever. That's a temporary fix. But if you're coming into it being like, Royce, can I come in 2 more days? And I was like, do you feel less stressed? Like, is that going to be more 1% joyful for you if you're coming in? I was like, yeah, it's the best part of my day. Let's do it. But if they're just like, I want to do it to lose weight, I'm immediately like, nah, let's stick to the plan. Let's get you to enjoy let's enjoy the first 3 days, and maybe we'll add a 4th day. And that those 3 days have to be very specific. And that's why I think personal training comes in super handy, because you're just customizing the most exciting hour for them, that they want to do a 4th hour. They want to do a 5th hour. But forcing them to do 5 just to do 5 is the same as your high school coach telling you to do burpees because no one's paying attention on the drill. You know what I mean?
Negative reinforcement.
Yeah.
I think we all had coaches that made everybody do a burpee penalty for someone else screwing up. That's
the coaches right there. They're coaching my kid right now. If you want him to enjoy that, tell them it's going to make him a better striker, better defender. And I think there's a better way to punish your kids.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In sports, for sure. Okay, so let's go into the third part to this, because now everyone understands why they're so fixated on the limits. And I'm guilty of it, believing those limits and going the path that maybe not is the most favorable for me. You've been in those limits before. And we're lucky enough to break those limits for people, one, but we're also constantly working on ourselves to break those limits. So the question is, like, how, if a person came in and you actually saw them, they're paralyzed because of these limiting beliefs, one, but maybe they're experiencing pain in some form, and you're coaching them from essentially from where they are now to potentially take action. What are some of the things that you would do for them, or you would encourage them to do to get them to take the next step?
Yeah, I think that what happens is, and it's real easy. It's real easy to fall into a fixed mindset. You know, we have these, we fixate on, you said fixated, you know, on limitations, and we come in here, and a lot of people come to us like that, and we have to shift them to a more of a growth mindset, and we break through those barriers, and it's a process.
Yeah.
You know, and we know how to do it.
What's process one for you?
Well, process one is, you know, what can you and can you not control? I mean, what is limiting you? You know, I mean, if you're worried about nuclear weapons in Iraq or Iran, whatever, you know, you're kind of going, okay, you know, I get that, but that's not something that you have control over, you know. But if it's something that we can address, then what we do is we say, okay, we acknowledge it. It was kind of like my water analogy with the golf. We acknowledge that there is a limiting factor or behavior, but we don't fixate on it, and we get past it. And then what we do is we introduce things, little like mini goals. Yeah. So we hit these little, you know, oh wow, you just added an extra 10 pounds, or wow, oh your back squat is getting better, and or you know, all of a sudden they're starting to say, wow, I'm getting these little wins. So I'm not over here anymore. I'm over here now. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about, wow. And I walk out of here going, wow, I really accomplished a lot. Yeah. And then it shifts slowly in some people, You know, some people get it right away and some people it takes a little longer,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but we break through a lot of that. And I think that you've been doing this a lot longer than me and you've seen it. And it doesn't limit your focus as a coach because you know you can't just throw up your arms and say, "Oh my God, I can't help this guy because he's so fixated on some." We go, "Okay, yeah, that's great, but we're not thinking about that. We're going to do this." And then all of a sudden, the mind starts shutting down. I told you the mind can be the enemy because the mind's telling you, "Can't do this. We're going to get hurt."
Yeah.
And we don't fixate on that. We move past that.
That's so good. I like the addressing of what can you control, what you can't control. Oftentimes I'll get clients that stop losing the weight or gain muscle. I've had both, right? And we ask them, all right, what do you have control over? Do you have control over the scale? Right? Some of them say, yes, I do. And some of them are like, no, I actually don't have control over the scale. It's like, so we point out everything that you're doing in terms of fitness. I'm sleeping, I'm eating macros, I'm watching my steps, I'm drinking my water, I'm trying to reduce my stress here. It's like, where are all of the areas you have control over? And just addressing that, and then they say, okay, what are the stuff that I can't control? It is often just the scale. You really don't have control over the scale as much as you think you do. Like, for instance, like we've had this scenario before where you drink 6 IPAs, you go into the mirror and you're like, damn, I'm looking even more shredded. This is weird. Yeah, right? Like, it's just like, or you eat bad food and then the next day you're like leaner than you are. That you don't have complete control because there's things that are happening in your body that's always constantly changing. There probably is more of a scientific evidence of why we are more shredded after drinking some alcohol. But for the most part, what I'm trying to get at is you have little control over the weight on the scale. You have much more greater control of what you're putting in your mouth, how much sleep you're getting, what type of movements you're doing in your exercise, and so on and so forth. And just addressing that is so powerful. That's 80% of the game. Because what ends up happening for me, sometimes you'll have to remind me when I'm worrying about certain things. It just makes me feel like a dickhead. I'm like, God, this guy's he's a wuss. He's like, bro, focus on the things you can control. So just by looking at it on paper, it makes you hyper fixated that you're like, okay, I get it. I need to work on that. And that's massive. And sometimes that is the only thing that I need to do in my coaching session that's going to get them to survive for the next 90 days. Just to show them. Not even tell them. I was like, which ones do you think you can control? Cool. Session's over. Boom. High five. I don't have to say anything, which is remarkable, isn't it? So that is one area that I do like. And then the other one, oh man, you're going to love the way you talked about breaking everything into like small wins. And I was listening to a podcast, and I don't know who this country singer was, but it was a country singer that won like a ton of Grammys. If you're a country person, write down in the comments. You might know who this person is. But anyways, he was so successful that he got everything pretty much made. He had a nice house, nice cars, maids, so on and so forth. But one thing he decided to do all the time was he would mow his own lawn, even though he could probably hire someone to do his lawn for him. But he would do it. And not only like it wasn't even a motorized one, it was the push one.
Oh, wow.
So you actually got to work to do it. You got to put in some serious effort. Have you done a push
Oh, yeah.
lawnmower?
Oh, yeah.
Did you get like
back in the day.
You got a sick pump, right? So, yeah. That's the only one I know how to work. I don't even know how to do the
when
gas
I was
one.
a kid.
That's
yeah.
That's hard work. But anyways, they interviewed him after. I was like, why don't you just hire someone to do that for you? And he was like, you know what? He's like, you know what? There's only a few things in my life now that when I put instant effort, I get an instant reward. Everything that I do now at the level is I don't reap any rewards until like 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. You make a CD that takes 3-4 years, you're probably going to get a Grammy like a year, 2 years later. You know what I mean? Right? Or you become the GOAT at some point at that level. So one, when you play the game long enough, the wins get less and less obvious. So you almost have to take some of these grand scheme of things like 100-pound weight loss and you make them into small games. You're like, I'm just going to lose a pound a week. I'm going to lose 5 pounds in a month. I'm going to work out 3 days this week. I'm going to go 4 days. I'm going to go 5 days. In vacation, normally I do 0 workouts. I'm going to do 1 workout in vacation. So you create this really long game, aka the Grammys, and you turn it into this like minimal level efforts. And you do it all the way to a point where you can figure out how to enjoy mowing a lawn. And the way I do that in my clients is like, I want you to focus just on this one movement. You just, like, your squat is so poor. Like, I want to improve it. So I'm going to put this ball behind you. Every single rep, you're going to touch that ball. And then they're like, and then when they finish it, I'm like, bro, you haven't squatted like that depth ever. I'm so pumped for you. Boom. High five. Now we've created that mowing lawn experience that they've expelled so much effort and they got an immediate reward for it. And that reward is just acknowledgement, 1, or number 2 is like, you've never squatted that low, dude. Congratulations. That's brand new for you.
Yeah, I think that people forget that a lot of this it's about, it becomes intrinsic.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find value inside. So, and it's the kind of the things that you do when no one's watching.
Yeah.
And I know you're like that. I mean, you're in here doing an hour's worth of burpees and there's nobody here watching you. And you don't go out and tell, and put it on social media and film it or say, hey, I did 1,000 burpees. I know you did 1,000 Murphs, but nobody knew you were doing 1,000 Murphs until you'd actually done it.
Yeah.
And I think that's, to me, maybe that's like mowing the lawn. He doesn't do it to impress anybody. He does it because it's kind of a meditative thing for him. He does it because maybe he finds peace, inner peace inside. Something inside is rewarding to him for him to want to do that. Sure, he could just pay some guy to do it.
Right.
Like me. I pay a guy to mow.
I'm
past that.
I'm good.
But I think that I think that there's, and that's the rewarding part. It's when people kind of get past the social media aspect or trying to impress others.
Yeah.
And then once you kind of get past that and you realize you're doing this for yourself, and it comes down to how strong is your why. I know you ask people why, I want to lose weight. Why? I want to look good for my high school graduation. Why? And then you get into about 6 or 7 levels and then you really feel like, well, maybe my doctor told me that I was pre-diabetic and, so how strong is your why? It's unfortunate that a lot of people don't really make life choices like this until someone like a doctor tells them that, they're sick or something.
100%. It's a couple of things on that why. The moment you ask them the 7th why, which is pretty cool, and they're very similar in answers a lot of times, and then you ask them maybe one more why. Like, how would you feel by the end of that? Let's just say you did get to there. You got to that 7th why. And oftentimes they'll say, I'll feel happier. I'll feel joyful. And I'm reading a book right now. It's called Same as Whenever. It was a quote. I highlighted it. It was like a person trying to be happier is like someone pointing at the mountain of Mount Everest and not realizing they were on top the whole time. They're like, I want to get to that mountain. But it's like, you are on that mountain right now. And I want to get to that mountain. And it's the same principle about mowing the lawn. Like, there's some serious amounts of joy. And when you get to the Grammys, you're going to feel at present, at peace, happy. And I'd advise, especially if you are in this health journey of yours, is to find what that end feeling is like and try to steal that feeling to the moment. The reason why I loved those burpees is because I actually just found it to be joyful. It was a moment for me to reflect and to relax and not think, right? Like, I would actually have my podcasts, the guys that I would follow or YouTube that I'm watching, I actually make that hour super enjoyable. Like, it's the best part for me.
Do your best thinking.
Yeah, I do my best thinking. I do my best listening. Sometimes you'll send me a podcast. I was like, I can't wait to listen to that. But I pair it with Murph. You know what I mean? And that's the mowing the lawn part for me. And I might not be doing it fast, but I'm probably still making some serious progress with my body over time, right? So, yeah, I wanted to tap that in because I'm glad that you brought that up.
I think that that's kind of what it's in a way. It might be what's missing in society nowadays because we've become so isolated. You know, you know, like when I was a kid, you went out and played, and there was a lot of social interaction and a lot of hard work. You know, you had to do chores.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't. I don't know. I mean, maybe we're just not as hard as we used to be as a society, you know, whatever, maybe because I'm an older person and I see that. But I think that, you know, that's why we come to the gym. That's why we do hard things in the gym. It's a way for us to touch that inner soul that's missing. You know, it's like our inner caveman, you know, that slept on cold floors and had to fight for food and starvation, and you know. So why do we do cold showers? Why do we do hard things? Why do guys run 100-mile ultra marathons and stuff? I mean, it's, you know, it's crazy. Why do people do some of the crazy hard things that they do? Why does a guy do 1,000 Murphs? Yeah. You know, I mean,
I think we just naturally will crave it.
Yeah.
Here's the dichotomy of innovation and accumulation of financial wealth. Like, we pay people more to make our lives easier. Amazon makes our lives easier. Fast foods make our lives easier. Ironically, our body will actually crave the opposite. And that's why I think CrossFit emerged. That's why I think cold plunges and cold showers emerged. I mean, I did this.
75 hard.
75 hard. Red light sauna. Like
Spartan races.
High rocks, like all of these things that are, I think they're torturous in nature. Like, they're hard, like physically hard. And it just like we seek that part of it. Just like there's a thing of like, I just took a cold shower, you know, and it's like a trending thing. But what's funny is I ChatGPT'd this, and in the 1950s is when we really started to implement showers just in general, let alone heated showers. So everyone from 1900s to 1950 were taking cold showers the whole time. Like, it wasn't a spectacle, you know? And so there's just that human nature. We were one, if we solve for financial poverty, like everyone is wealthy all of a sudden, I think I think the status game would still be there, you know, and it wouldn't be more financial, but it would be more, you would measure your status of essentially doing hard things. I really do think. So let's just say everyone got more money. The new layer of wealth would be difficulty, because now everyone can. That's just my theory, and I don't know if it'll ever happen, but the status game will always be there, and the status game at the very long run of it is difficulty, because not everyone will want to do the hard thing, and that's how you separate yourself. And for some reason, people, I think, strive to somewhat feel special by doing something special. You know what I mean? That's just the theory of mine.
I think that you're, as an individual, you have to choose a path. You know, I mean, there are exceptions. Maybe you're extremely overweight and you are diabetic and you have to take Ozempic. Yeah. But there's a lot of people in society who take Ozempic that don't really need to be taking it. Or look at steroids or peptides and a lot of these, you know, SARMs and these performance enhancing drugs. And, you know, we're just, so there's the shortcut and then there's the hard path. And I think that once you kind of, you know, choose the harder path,
right,
you realize that it's the only real true path to maybe happiness. You know, I think it's a lot better, you know, the short path, maybe with the exception of having somebody mow your own lawn. Yeah. But the thing is, we've definitely as a society chosen comfort over, you know, pleasure over pain, as you said, you know, and that's where, you know, they come to us and they're in that pleasure mode. And sometimes we have to say, okay, that's okay, but that's not what we're about. We're going to inflict some pain, you know, and I know that sounds scary.
Yeah.
But it is truly, it's fun to watch people as they come in here and they're kind of like wide-eyed and they don't really know what to expect. And then all of a sudden you see them and they become hardened athletes. And some people that spend enough time really do accomplish some amazing things. You know, I mean, I know from my own perspective is I never went into this process thinking I would be the person that I am now.
Yeah.
There was just no way of knowing that, you know, I think I said it in the last podcast, it's a lot like Groundhog Day. If you do this long enough, you get good at stuff.
Yeah.
You
for
know,
sure.
a lot of different things.
Yeah, man, we're just turning this into some philosophical.
I know that's
right
my
now.
fault. That's probably my fault.
I love it. And you know what? In the nutshell of things, if you guys are this deep, this work that we do is very philosophical. And the shortcut and taking the hard path, like, that's your choice. I think that's your choice. My choice is not taking the shortcut, obviously. But then I've also seen stories where people are like the financial people. They're, I'm going to keep saving. I'm going to keep saving. And by the time, you know, they're eating ramen the whole time, and then the person gets cancer at 36 and dies. Right, and they saved all the way to that.
And the other guy's smoking cigarettes, and he's 100, and
he's 100, and he's trading Bitcoin. You know, he's making $1 trillion. Like, those are your choices, you know. But what I really want to capture here is if you are having like this internal battle where you want to break it to the next level.
You're gonna get that?
Is that yours?
No, it's not mine. I don't think it might be behind me.
Sorry, guys.
Listen, if you're trying to lose weight, but you're just frustrated because you just can't seem to see any results, we would love to help you out. Now, we've been helping thousands of our athletes over the course of a decade by crafting personalized programs that are not only sustainable, but also effective. Now, if you're ready to transform your health, click on the show notes below, book a call with one of our coaches. We'd love to help you out. Now back to the show. Peace.
You guys.
Edit that out.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, if you're having this philosophical battle of like, I want to break the belief. I want to break the new limit. And I feel like I'm missing something. This is how you do it. So the other two ways, just to kind of sum this up, is one way is just to take something that what you're doing now and just make it a little bit harder. Because naturally, we're wired to do the things that are easier. Just make things harder incrementally. Meaning, like, if you park really close to the grocery store, just park a little further. That's one way, super easy way to do it.
Take the stairs.
Take the stairs. If the workout says 10 reps, just do an 11th rep and don't tell anybody. Just do 11th rep. No one's going to know.
I know that's your jam.
That's my jam.
You're always doing another round, and everybody's going, man.
Did you do 11 reps? And I was like, yeah, Steve.
I lost count.
Yeah, I lost count, man. No big deal. But I always do one more thing that's a little bit harder. It could also be, you know what? I'm just going to prolong my fast by another hour. I'm going to eat one more vegetable. I'm going to eat one more protein. I'm going to say no to my kids' Cheetos on that plate. Just do something hard consecutively. If you do this long enough, you will have confidence to do way harder things at some point. Those little mini things that you do that are really hard, like kind of hard, you will do. It just adds up, right? What's 1% plus 1%? It's 2%. What's 1% plus 99%? It's 100%. That's how you get to 100%. Just doing 1% every single time. So that's like the other thing for me.
I think that you hit on something there. I think that once people get past the instant gratification and they start realizing, because that's not really the true path. And once they kind of realize that they have to work hard, suffer, try hard things, and then because a lot of people look at us and they go, wow, you guys have really accomplished a lot, but they didn't see the iceberg under the water, the work that went behind doing this, but I don't want it to make it sound like it's all, difficult and pain. I mean, there's a lot of enjoyment in it. I mean, and I think we all, I mean, this is what we do. And this is what, I would be miserable if I couldn't do this for the rest of my life. And that's what frustrates me when I see people who aren't there yet. Yeah. And I think a lot of it comes back to full circle, comes back to, we have to kind of get into the mindset of what really is going on.
Yeah.
And then we can accomplish some really amazing things physically.
It's just like one of those sayings. it's harder than it looks. But then the other side to it, that you add the Steve caption to it, but it's more fun than you realize.
Yeah.
It's harder than it looks, but it's more fun than you realize.
Well, I remember when I used to work out with you, when you and I did our one-on-ones, and and I would go in knowing that I was going to suffer, and it was really, and sometimes it would be I would have this apprehension and almost this nervousness of knowing that I was going to really get my butt kicked in a workout. But what's funny is sometimes if it wasn't as hard as I thought, I was actually disappointed.
Yeah.
And then I'd say, and then I'd actually put pressure on you to make it harder. And then you'd say, okay, well, sorry, dude. I mean, it wasn't hard enough. And you be careful what you ask for. I always tell people that, when people come to me and say, that wasn't very hard, I say, be careful what you ask for, because we can always make it harder. But yeah, we find that sweet spot. Mm-hmm. But I think that, you find that most of the athletes that come in the gym really, truly want it to be hard.
Yeah. In some level.
Yes.
Eventually, right? Like, so let's sum this up, because we can keep
go
going
on forever.
This. But if you are trying to break beliefs, Steve and I broke this down. The first one is identify them. Identify what the limit is. And the way you do that is and once you get there, you ask yourself what you can and can't control. That is one element to it. The second element to it is take the long game and break it up into very small games to mowing. You're doing it yourself level, that you find enjoyment in the immediate effort and you get an immediate reward. And the way you do that is just shorten the game. And then the final one is just taking something that you're currently doing and just making it 1% harder, and do that daily. And then it stacks up, and you'll start creating this confidence, this courage to take on these limits that you'll inevitably hit, these failure points, these challenge points, and you'll have enough muscle to be able to handle it. Does that sum up what kind of
well said? Yeah. Yes, I'm absolutely. That's why you're the man.
Yeah, I just wanted to break it down, because
how can I be the man if you're the man?
I like to break it down with my OCD mind. But guys, if you guys like this episode, Coach Steve and I did an episode on pretty contrarian lessons after you're 50. So if you guys want to watch that, the link is going to be up here. You'd be very surprised what we think about 50, being 50, and the lessons there. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.